All right. It's best when the title of this is just a study. And I was just thinking about, people that can be very, very negative, but they say that they're Christians, but everything comes across negatively. And then it seems like they may have admiration for other people, or they pretend that they are friends with other people, that they get along with other people, and this, that, and the other. But when they open up their mouth, everything comes out, and then you know that things are not as it seems. And so, to me, I've seen lately where it just seems that some people that say they're Christians, they are seeking approval from the world more than they're seeking godly favor. So if you want godly favor, um, if you're a Christian, rather, you should want the godly favor. You should be looking for um, acceptance with God. You should be looking, Psalms 91 talks about, a relationship with God that one would desire. There's a couple people that I'm going to talk about in this post that God favored, that God honored, that God blessed, that God, even called them certain things, as far as their relationship. For example, Sarah's name was changed from, I'm assuming it was pronounced like Sarai. Her last name ended with Rai, and he changed it to Sarah. So the name meaning was just about the same, but one or two words changed everything in the meaning of her name. So her name went from princess to princess for all. So she was a mother of all, just as Abraham became the father of nations. Sarah also, um, as God changed her name, um, the meaning of her name changed also to all. And so this is our identity shaped in substance and shaped in Christ. And the subtitle is The Danger in Never Seeing the Likeness of Whom You Would Choose as Identity versus the danger in becoming the chosen. So when we choose to be Christians, our ultimate goal is to become chosen. God said many are called, but few chosen. So if you're going to walk the Christian life, the Bible does teach us to count the cost, because you don't want to be wasting your time. So if you are a Christian, then your ultimate goal should be to become a chosen. And when I say chosen, I'm not talking about just the popular catchphrase as being chosen. I'm talking about accepted with God, honored by God, and knowing that you are blessed of God and having the fruits of blessing. So the fruits of blessing is very, very important. All right, so substance and character are what leads and makes you understand that you do have the right relationship with God. Is what is your substance like, and do you have the character of God? So, one popular verse that most people consider and think about is Proverbs 31, the virtuous woman. Being virtuous is ideal, but not only self seeking. Because when I think of the virtuous woman as it was described, it gave her like she had about 15 jobs. Okay. She didn't just do one or two things. And it's okay if you're just have a job and maybe you take care of kids, or you got a husband or a wife. For the guys, and just have one or two jobs, that's just fine. But the virtuous woman that the Bible talked about, she like literally had like seven or eight jobs. So in that virtuousness, that's not just about going out to conquer and subjugate, or shouldn't use the word conquer because conquer is a good word. We're going to talk about that later, but it's not in a way of subjugating people. So you're not trying to go out there and subjugate the world. We're not whoever came before Christopher Columbus. I'm not going to just say Christopher Columbus because there was a couple of people before him, but we are not trying to do that. So we do want to be virtuous. Some people today, especially with the advent of uh, more online capabilities, people are trying to get more streams of income. So that's why I say virtuous, but not only self-seeking, because again, you can have multiple things going on to be virtuous, but it shouldn't all be self-seeking. So you want to make sure your virtuosity isn't only self-seeking. And then Isaiah 51:2 speaks about Sarah. It calls, in this verse, 51:2, it encourages us to be like Abraham and Sarah. It said Abraham, who's the father of the nations, and Sarah, who's the mother. And in this particular verse, it just mentions Sarah there as mother, but we know that in other places in the Bible, as such as Peter and other places, it spoke about Sarah having a quiet spirit. And so you can be quiet. That doesn't mean you have to be passive. So quiet is not passive, but you can have a quiet spirit, not be passive, but not be loud, because being loud is not being quiet. Now, I do love uh, Tasha Cobb's song where she said we're gonna get loud and this and the other. There's a time and place for all things. So if you're praising the Lord, you're worshiping the Lord, you're getting loud, you're at a game, you're getting loud. Okay. So I'm just saying that it does make a difference, but you shouldn't be a loud person 24/7. I'm just saying that that's just something that you want to work on. When I first read that about Sarah having a quiet spirit, I had to work on, I'm like, God, give me a quiet spirit. So I was never a loud person, to be honest, but I wanted to make sure that I was in line with the attributes and have that substance that Sarah had as far as having a quiet spirit. So again, that's Isaiah 51:2. Ruth 1:14, faithful. We all know about Ruth's faithfulness. Not only did Ruth not leave Naomi's side, Ruth also, there is a multitude of things that Ruth did. Um, And I've got a couple of slides that's going to show all of the things that Ruth did. Ruth was faithful. Ruth, she obeyed Naomi. Ruth also sought the favor of Boaz. All right. Some people do certain things. Let's say, for instance, Tamar. When Tamar kind of seduced, well, I forgive me for using the word seduce. I was trying to find something to use there, but Judah approached her, so she didn't try to be seductive with him, but she was dressed as a prostitute, so that's why I said seduce. So when she quote unquote seduced, or dressed as a prostitute and was with Judah, she didn't seek the favor. She was not seeking the favor of Judah, and Tamar was from of the Canaanites. And when we talk about the difference of women of Canaan and women like Ruth, women like Sarah, we are looking at different attributes, different substance, different characters of these women. So Ruth had a lot of attributes and a lot of substance, which is why she was chosen as a progenitor. Peter, honoring and honorable. First Peter 2:17 tells us to honor other people. So that's another, substance and character, honoring and being honorable. So it's easier to honor someone than to also yourself become an honorable person. So that's what we want to do too. We want to be honorable. Everyone is not going to like you. Everyone is not going to respect you. Everyone is not going to honor you. But if you're honorable in God's sight, you will be honored by other people. Again, not everyone, of course. You could even be disrespected by people. You can be ostracized by people. That doesn't mean that you're not honorable, but you need yourself to be honorable. So you need to honor other people, and you yourself need to be honorable. 1 Samuel 18:1. Uh, Speaking of devotion, um, and being devoted uh, does not mean blindly devoted. Okay, and Jonathan proved that. Samuel 18:1 is talking about Jonathan and David, and that's why I have devoted there. Not being blindly devoted as Jonathan, he proved that by upbraiding Saul. So he proved that by his dedication to David, um, against his father, he proved that he wasn't dishonoring Saul, but he was honoring David by being devoted to David. So devotion is substance and character. Jeremiah 10:24 and Philippians 4:15 talk about control and moderation. And speaking of control and moderation, Genesis 16:4 through 6 is a good example of use of control. Now, I'd like to talk about that for a moment. So, in Genesis 16:4 through 6, that is the instance where, or incident where Sarah and Hagar had, a conflict. Um, and after Hagar got pregnant, it said that she despised Sarah. So she didn't only maybe talk a little harshly to Sarah. She didn't only, it didn't say she was just disobedient to Sarah. It says she despised Sarah. That's a really strong feeling, okay? That is definitely a feeling of substance, okay? Despising someone is a feeling of substance. So when it comes to her despising, then Sarah spoke to her harshly and took control of the situation. So that's an important example of use of control. So in Jeremiah 10:24, Jeremiah says, God, correct me, but not in anger, that you harm me. In Philippians 4:15 says for us to be led in moderation. Let all of our dealings and everything be in moderation. So that's a part of substance and character, is control and moderation. And finally, Malachi 4:6, love for the family unit. Malachi 4:6 speaks of God, of us, turning the hearts of, well, it's talking about Elijah coming back, but personally, I believe that all of us should have the spirit of Elijah. I think when we believe in God and we take on the attributes, the substance of God and the character of God, we also have those attributes as Elijah. And just like he said that John was actually Elijah when he came. And that's why I honestly think that we all should have the spirit of Elijah, whereas we're turning the hearts of the children to the father and the father to the children. So we should have love for the family unit. That is absolutely a substance in character. The etiquette of substance. So let's talk about the meaning of substance. Substance, a couple of words for substance is material, texture, core, body, staple. A couple of opposite words for substance is abstract, nothingness, inanimate, poverty. I was surprised to kind of see that, but not shocked. Worthlessness and unimportant. So we see those things abstract, poverty, nothingness, worthlessness, unimportant. Those are words that we don't want associated with ourselves if we're Christians. Um, some of those words we use interchangeably, so we're not saying that if you ever use any of those words referring to yourself or anything about Christianity, then it's not Christian. No. Not saying that whatsoever, but I'm saying that those are words that lack substance. They lack character. So the word body occurs in the Bible 680 times. Body is one of the words for substance. Body, material, texture, core, and staple. Body occurs in the Bible 680 times. The first occurrence is Genesis 15:4. The verse says, and quote, one who comes from your own body. That was another time that God was speaking to Abraham and Sarah about a child, and God who said, one who comes from your own body. So that's one example of body. Also Leviticus 11:8. You must not touch their dead body. That's another example of body. Thus, in this one, Leviticus 11:8, the substance contaminates. So we're talking about bodies. There's a body um, that brings life, and then this body could bring death and contaminate. Also, Proverbs 4:22 says, "My sayings, quote, brings health to all their body." This thus is serving purpose and good. So that body bringing health to all their body is serving purpose and good. So you want to stay away from any kind of substance that contaminates, that brings death. You want substance that brings health, that serves purpose and does good. Another word for substance was staple. So the meaning of one of the words or uses for staple, a staple in people's lives generally is indicative of meaning the primary, main, or standard. So the primary, main, or standard. Without substance, the threat of poverty may cloud situations. Poverty is not only in finances, but it's also spiritual and social. So someone may say, well, someone has poverty of finances. Well, they might not have a lot financially, but how is their spiritual life and their social life? Do they have substance in their spiritual and their social life? Because God tells us to be equally yoked, and that starts within ourselves also, so that we're not lacking. We know that the Bible says little with the righteous is more than the riches of many wicked. So again, little with the righteous man or little with the righteous person is more than the riches of many wicked. So we want to make sure that we stay away from things that would cause poverty, which is a lack of substance. So again, without substance is the threat of poverty that may cloud situations, and we want to be on the other side of that. So we want substance, again, with that staple word for substance is being staple. So that's the primary, main, or standard. So you should absolutely have a standard of good substance. Your primary should be good substance, or your main things, your main character, your main attributes should be good substance. Okay, so Ruth was grafted in versus the women of Canaan and idols. So Ruth being grafted in just makes me think about and reminds me of how Jesus talked about, especially I think it was John, it might have been in John 10 or John 15, he talked about himself being a root, and us not being Israelites were grafted in. So grafted in as branches, as like a, not calling us wild or whatever, but we were grafted in like wild branches. Ruth was grafted in also. Ruth was not of that part of Israel. I think Ruth was a Moabitess, I'm sure, but I know that she was married Naomi's son in Moab, so I think she was a Moabitess. And so she was not of the land, so she was grafted in. So we are grafted in. So we are grafted in, and so we know that we can be grafted in. We don't have to wonder if we can be accepted of God, if we can be a noble person, if we could be a virtuous woman or man, we don't have to wonder about those things. Ruth was grafted in, so we can be those things too. So looking at Ruth, and the women of Canaan and idols, the first point here says Esau heard his father instruct Jacob not to marry from the women of Canaan. So we know that Esau had married two women before he ended up marrying other women of in Israel that were not Canaanites. And so Esau heard him, but Esau had married women that were not of that were of Canaan, and he heard how that displeased his father, and they sent Jacob away. They didn't want Jacob to marry women of Canaan. The second point, Abraham sent his servant through a pure faith search to find Isaac a wife. Abraham also sent his servant away from the Canaanite women to find a wife, which he found Rebecca. But again, we know that it was not a arranged marriage before his servant went out. So it was a pure faith search, that Abraham sent his servant out to find a wife for Isaac. The next point is Judah married a Canaanite, and God killed both of his sons. So and Onan were both of Judah's sons from a Canaanite woman, and God was displeased with him, and God killed both of them. Next point is Rahab. Rahab was solely saved by her faith. So when we look at that substance and we look at attributes, we want those kind of things. We want that faith walk that we're supposed to have. We want to live a life of faith. We all fall short sometimes of faith. I have fallen short of faith. We all basically, mostly, I can't speak for everyone, but I know from testimonies that I've heard everyone say that, in my earshot, say that they have fallen short of faith before. So we do, but we've got to remember how important faith is. Rahab was solely saved because of her faith, because Rahab also, she was a foreigner. And so no one else was saved when they went and sought out the land of Jericho. Only Rahab was saved, and it was solely through her faith. These next points are going to talk about Ruth. So Ruth cleaved to Naomi. I talked about that. These are the attributes and the substance of Ruth. These are all the things that Ruth encompassed. Ruth cleaved to Naomi. Ruth accepted the Lord as her God. She told Naomi, she said, your God will be my God. Because Naomi, as we know, had told them to go back, daughters, go back to your gods, go back to your family. I can't have any more sons, and if I could, like, you guys would be quite old, so, and you're not going to be waiting around for them. So she was, obviously trying to be nice, but just letting them know you're free to go back to your family. You're free to go back even to your gods. And Naomi also said gods because she had fallen into despair. And we sometimes, despair is not like a fatal word. It's not a really horrible word. Despair is quite easy to fall into. We see from things like suicide. We see from oftentimes a lack of faith. We see that people have fallen into despair. So at that time, Naomi had fallen into despair. And she even told them to go back to their gods. But Ruth didn't go back to her God. So not only did she cleave to Naomi, she also accepted the Lord as her God. And she said that, she professed that. She said, no, your God will be my God. So she accepted our Lord, the Lord, our Savior, as her God. So she accepted the Lord as her God. Ruth obeyed Naomi. That was another act of substance. She obeyed Naomi. Ruth also, as I said before, in the opening, Ruth sought the favor of Boaz. So she didn't do kind of like Tamar did. Although we're not bashing Tamar whatsoever, Tamar also had children that was of the lineage of Jesus, because Tamar also made righteous acts. better than Judah. So it's, again, it's not to bash her. We know that she acted also out of desperation. So desperation is part of despair. So she acted out of desperation, because she wanted to have a child and she had waited so long. And Judah was, he had a lack of integrity for following through with her as he had promised. So, but the difference between Ruth and Tamar here is Ruth sought the favor of Boaz. So that is an attribute and substance of Ruth that she had. And finally, Ruth became a progenitor of Jesus. So we all know that Ruth is a progenitor of Jesus. Idol worship. So Canaan may not have been the most sinful place, okay? So it's not but they had a good proximity to Israel, and God had given the land that Canaan had occupied to Israel. So some people say, that, well, that's where God, is a hypocrite and this, that, the other. No, God owns everything. And Canaan didn't claim the land. None of those people had claimed the land at those times. They weren't claiming things like we claim today. The United States is, like where we have citizenship and things like that. Canaan was just occupying that place, okay, because they were not claiming things like that at that time. So they had occupation there, okay. So they had occupation there, but because God is the owner, God had gave the land to Israel. So um, that's what that was. And so in idol worship. So I just wanted to make that point, though. It's not that Canaan had to been the most sinful, no, but they had proximity to Israel and God had given them the land that they were occupying. So let's look at the idol worship, though, that talks about their sin and that, points to the sin that they did have. So one thing, the Canaanites had temple prostitution. So they had prostitution in the temples, and they just were filled with all manner of, we consider sin today. Now, people may say, well, they didn't consider, that a sin, or, this, that, and the other. They didn't have the laws. Well, this is the whole point of a godly character, is that God does have laws. God does have standards. God does have ways. So if we're going to be a Christian, then that's what we want to follow. Because again, we want to be a Christian. We want to be chosen by God. Because again, many are called, but few chosen. So we want to be chosen by God. And again, that's not to brag or beat anybody across the head, or try to weaponize yourself being chosen, because you're chosen by your fruits. You're chosen by your obedience. So I'm just saying your life will speak on whether you're chosen. I can't say if somebody else is chosen. I can only say if I think I'm chosen. And I can only think I'm chosen if I see fruit in my life, if I know that I'm obedient to God. Those are the only ways that I'm going to assume that I'm the chosen of God. So they had temple prostitution. They offered children in fire. So there was a form of child sacrifice. They had rape rituals. Baal himself, is the myth of Baal is that he had a virgin sister and he used to rape the virgin sister. And I'm not just making that up. This is what I, researched and found out about the Canaanite rituals and worship, about their idol worship. So they had rape rituals, and the whole myth of Baal was that he used to rape his mythical sister. I think her name was Aunt, Aunt Tura, something like that. But she was supposedly a virgin, and he also supposedly raped her. So they had rituals, and then they also had fertility worship. And so we only want to worship God. We don't want to worship any other idols, like the Bible teaches us. If you're going to make something and call it a god, but you have to carry it, you have to mold it out yourself, and you're doing all these things to say that it's a god, then that's just a weird god, because that God doesn't have breath. The God is not spiritual. So, you don't want to worship anything at all besides God. Becoming the chosen. So that's what we again want to get to finally, and this is like the end of my time here. But our thing is we want to become the chosen, and then we want to be reconciled to God. So reconciliation, being reconciled to God through faith, character, attributes, which is substance, and obedience, assures that we live a triumphant, fruitful, blessed, and conquering life. And that is again is what we want to do. Again, I already talked about becoming chosen, and you can look at those that PowerPoint again. But in the end, if we follow these things that we've talked about and um, discussed and talked about, at the end, we will be reconciled to God. Being reconciled to God again through faith, character, attributes, which is substance, and obedience assures us that we live triumphant, fruitful, blessed, and conquering because that is our end goal. Thanks.